what do you think about Russia? Because I do pay attention to you, Nick, and I've noticed some changes, sometimes subtle changes. Sometimes I hear, I don't know, something that I had said come out of your mouth. It must be a coincidence, of course. But okay. So how did we get from saying now I'm no one to criticize anyone here because back in 2017 we actually chanted Russia is our friend while holding tiki torches, which is cringe as hell. But where did we get from like you and Afbax being like, let's hear it from Vlad Putin? And yeah. Two, I can tell you're more nuanced and more critical about these things over, say, 4 years. So what are some of your thoughts on Russia in general? And then in particular, tell us about how you've maybe rethought things, because I think you have.
Yeah, well, you're definitely right. And you're right. Look, you're an inspiration to me. I pay attention to you. You're an original thinker. And you and Charles Johnson and Leah McGrath and like that whole crew kind of came together to really push back, I think, on the excesses of the right wing, where it totally got a little wild, where it was like, no, we're on Team Russia, and the vaccine is a bioweapon, and like the vaccine's killing people, but like it doesn't have nano chips in it. It doesn't have nanotechnology. So I started to read that stuff and say, okay, so no, there is nuance there, and the way I would describe it is this: for me personally, I became very pro-Russia because I was actually very anti-Russia in Trump's first term. Contrary to Trump himself and the Duganists, my college roommate, well, not my roommate, but a friend of mine in college was a huge Duganist and a huge fan of yours, actually. He's a Russian Jew. He's a Russian Jew, actually, but he loved Russia. And I would do my show when I was 18, and I would say, Reagan heroically defeated the Russians, and he would say, you're so blue-pilled, like Russia's the hero or whatever. And anyway, but for me, the change came after 2021 when the Biden administration came in. And in 2021, I'm thinking, okay, so they rigged the election. They're throwing everybody in jail. They're just weaponizing this. They're going to force everyone to get the vaccine. We're in the Great Reset, which, however conspiratorial you want to be about it, it did forever alter the economy. Like the economic transformation, I think, it really imprinted itself on the economy even to this day in a lot of different ways. But anyway, I saw that with Biden, and I basically saw no hope. I said, we're only going to get more censored. We're all going to get thrown in jail. Like a Republican's never going to win again. They're never going to open the economy. And I said, so the only thing, and I was actually thinking this way that we're talking about today, back then, I said, so the only way America can change is from without. America cannot change from within because the center is too powerful. The center is too dominant. We tried it with Trump. He couldn't do it. I said, so what has to happen now is that Russia and China are going to team up. They're going to balance against the United States. And I legitimately thought maybe they're going to open up a social media company that we can use, or we can have a Chinese bank account, or, maybe they'll fund opposition in America and pursue regime change in America. And I thought that might be sort of like when France intervened in the American Revolution against the British. It would be a great power competition that would empower the dissidents, and it'd be a form of like arbitrage in the same way that we back Navalny and talk about the Uyghurs. Maybe the Chinese and the Russians would talk about white nationalists and Trumpists and that sort of thing. So that was kind of my idea. And that's really why I embraced it. And then things changed, because at the same time in 21, I said that there's a chance that the left has overplayed their hand. And by censoring Trump, you're going to actually get like very powerful private players that are going to intervene, and they're going to see it as like a distressed asset or an undervalued asset. And they're going to go all in on free speech, or, they're going to buy up the Republican Party to basically have a coup, which is what wound up happening. And so then I guess I just came back to my ordinary, because it was my view all along that Russia is not, I never made the case that Russia is like a trad Christian paradise, or like they're the real conservatives, or, I always saw them as, look, they are geopolitically, strategically our enemy, and they're trying to hurt us. And we are in a constant sort of state of war and cyber and in spying and espionage. I guess the other thing, just briefly, is I saw their influence on the right wing, which is there was that article in The Nation, which came from Spyfill by James Bramford, where they said that there was a Russian connection with Trump. It's just that it ran through Israel also. And it was maybe the Chabad Lubavitchers, and it's maybe this weird relationship between Israel and Russia. But there is a dimension where Russia is doing disinformation in the United States, trying to, and they were backing the Eurosceptic parties in Europe also, and the anti-NATO stuff too. So I guess my position on Russia now is we should treat them like a middle power, sort of, or what would you call it? That, you know, they don't want to be friends with China, and they don't trust the Chinese, and they don't trust us, and they don't want to be friends with us either. But maybe like Turkey, we can kind of bring them into the fold, or like Brazil, maybe we can have a relationship with them while they have a relationship with China, while keeping them sort of at arm's length and being skeptical of their potential pawns or spies in the American media. That's kind of where I'm at now, where I've settled.
I understand that. Yeah, I agree with a lot of that, and I would go further. I think that there is extreme negative energy towards the West itself coming from Russia, and it's been like that. And it's important not. I feel like I was never, again, it would be sort of interesting, like for a spy novel, if I had like some Kremlin agent tell me things, but I had people around me, and due to my marriage, especially people around me who were influencing me in that way. It's sort of like, when you're young, you think a McDonald's hamburger is like this is going to be really funny, actually. Okay. So when you're young, you think like the McDonald's hamburger is really great. And then you become very mature and sophisticated. And you understand that, in fact, a caramelized onion with Swiss cheese and mushroom concoction is magnifique. But then you sort of get older and you kind of appreciate the McDonald's hamburger. Like if you're on a road trip and you're like, all right, where's a McDonald's? I'm starving. This thing gets the job done. It's the same everywhere. You almost appreciate that thing that you were snobby about. And I feel like when I was younger, I would say the Cold War was totally awesome. Like Reagan beat the commies. And then I became overly snobby, and it's like, oh no, we were the wrong side of the Cold War. And now in my older age, I'm like, the Cold War was great. Reagan beat the commies. I've kind of come back to that, the at first glance opinion, the initial obvious opinion sort of is right, and you appreciate that. The other thing I wanted to say was that there is this danger of being used, and like Tenet Media is. Besides a national security threat, it's just a fucking embarrassment, to do that stuff. You are a ventriloquist dummy with someone's hand up, up your what. I mean, it's just, it's embarrassing to be used like that. And I don't want to be used like that. I don't want to be seen by some Kremlin operative as like, oh, he's a merchant of chaos and nastiness. So let's throw him 1,000 rubles so that he can create more pain in the country. That actually does bother me. And I feel unwittingly, of course, but I feel like I was that, in a way. And I'll just say this, this is a welcoming forum, of course. There was a recent article that came out by some group that was like studying network effects and things like that. And they're like, Nick claims to be America first, but in fact, it's Nigerians or whatever. Now, I don't think you're working for them, nor do I think you're buying bots or anything like that. But they might, like the numbers are the numbers. They might see you as like, this throws a wrench into the gears. And I feel like, again, that would bother me in the sense of being used for someone who ultimately despises me, ultimately hates what I love, and is using me as a tool for some little tactical agenda. I mean, look, Putin, he went to Dresden, and after the end of the Cold War, he was involved, and before the end of the Cold War, he was involved with the remnant of the Red Army faction, which was an extreme left group. He had dealings with neo-Nazis in East Germany and then in the unified Germany. They don't care about us. If they find any use for us, it's so that we can fuck things up. And so I don't think you can really, I think it's worrisome to get too close and buddy with Russia. It's cringe, it's embarrassing, but I think you can be used in a way that's very destructive. And the other thing that I have felt is someone like Alexander Dugin, he can talk about, like, oh, the real Europe will rise up or whatever. They hate us. Michael McFaul, a person I usually don't really like that much, he went to Russia and he spoke with Putin, and Putin he wrote about this in an op-ed in Washington Post. He scratched his hand and he said, "You think we're white. We're not white. This is an illusion." I don't think we can really underestimate the animosity of Russia and these actors. I don't think they want a happy-go-lucky multipolar world, or they want that only to the extent that America turns in on itself in chaos. So anyway, I'm preaching and not asking questions, but you can respond if you'd like.
I totally agree. I agree with all that. And I think you're right. We can't underestimate their animosity because, they're very clear in their rhetoric about what they think about us. And it's interesting how when the right wing treats Russia, they're always falling for this Russian propaganda where Russia says the satanic West. The West is satanic. The West is evil because the West is transgendered and the West is, whatever. Mm-hmm. But they always leave on the cutting room floor that they're also always attacking colonialism. And they're saying that the European Union are Nazis. NATO is the new Nazis. And when you think about the past 200 years, you sort of get it. Because of Napoleon, because of Hitler, because of the Kaiser. And so they actually do legitimately see NATO as this German army marching eastward on Russia, and they hate it. And they hate that we're liberal. They hate that we have political liberty. They hate that we are, that we are that civilization. So I totally agree with you. And that doesn't make me like, obviously they're at war with Ukraine. I'm not pro-Ukrainian, but I am pro-European. And I especially hate it when you get these like Matt Walsh types or whoever that say, I hate the Europeans. They're a bunch of like socialists, sissy, whatever. It's like, no, they're actually our closest allies. They're the motherland. They have a rich, prosperous economy, even to the extent that they're liberal and secular. I think it is motivated by something good. It's motivated by this kind of compassion for the world or, care for humanity in and of itself or for the planet or the environment. I think those are good things. That's part of what makes us us. And so I like the idea of the European Union as a distinct power in its own right, standing alongside the United States. And I would even prefer to fortify that over aligning with Russia, rebuild Europe's army and let that be the ally rather than relying on Russia, which you're right. I think they're not us, they're Slavic, Asiatic, maybe be another way to say that. And I regard them very similar to China. It's just like one of these Asian empires, and it has little to do with Europe, at least at this point in history. So, as far as the intervention of foreign powers, I think you're going to get some of that no matter what. Like Trump raises the flag, and I'm sure there was backing for that. And then Biden came in, and there was backing for that. And so I think there's like a low background kind of noise with that across the board when you get to a certain level. But I just try to avoid these displays like Tucker Carlson has put on, where he's sniffing the bread and glazing the shopping carts, and he's in Qatar saying, I'm an American. Of course I could buy a house in Doha. It's like, what? Like, do you even hear yourself anymore? So I just try to avoid that. And the kind of third world is Jackson Hinkle, de-sucking, where he goes to like Niger and he's hanging out with them.
Luke.
Hey, Richard, can you hear me?
Yes.
So Nick, I had a bit of a polemical question for you. You've spoken a lot about Russia and how your opinion has changed on it over the years. I wanted to ask you specifically about the Ukraine war and how your opinion has changed on that over time. I guess maybe I'll just make the case for you. America, I feel, has gained a lot from the Ukraine war indirectly. We've strengthened our alliances with Europe. Our defense industry has been revitalized, and all of our natural gas exports now goes to Europe instead of Russia's. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, could you make an America first case for supporting Ukraine now? And I guess what is your opinion on that?
100%. Everything you said is true. And there's a few things. It proved that Russia is militarily weak because they haven't been able to defeat Ukraine in almost 4 years now. Two, you're right, it did refortify the NATO alliance. And now all of Western Europe is with us against China. I mean, they buy Huawei and stuff, but they're way more on the same page. It made them dependent on us. The what was it? The Build Back Better. I forget one of the Biden. It was either the Biden infrastructure law or the BBB. It made Europe dependent on us. And the Ukraine war has destroyed Europe's economy, got rid of their cheap energy, hurt Germany's industry. And if you look at the European economy since the pandemic and the Ukraine war, we have totally outpaced them. So it has sort of been a boon for us strategically. And I think that it's not all negative. So, I'm obviously against the foreign aid, and I'm wary of the risks of nuclear war. And some people say, I think it's overblown in one sense. Whenever Russia talks about nuclear weapons, people say nuclear war is imminent. That's obviously signaling. That's telegraphing. That's part of it. That's part of strategy. So in that sense, it's overblown. At the same time, miscalculations do occur. And I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that a tactical nuclear weapon is used if the Russian state collapses. These things like Operation Spiderweb, very provocative, the drone operation in June. But yeah, I mean, and honestly, at this stage in the game, you can't really end the war. I said this on my show about a month ago. Once you're in, you're in. There's no scenario where you say, okay, we're going to give up. Russia takes everything. No, once you're in, you're kind of involved. And so I've been very conflicted about it on my show, because you'd like to say, well, just give everything to Russia. They won. But that hurts us. That has deep ramifications. And maybe it shouldn't have happened. Maybe, but it did. And now we're in it. And now we got to fight to the finish. So, I see where you're coming from. I'm not like a pro-Russia partisan like I was a few years ago.
Yeah, music to my ears. Q.